Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 is a game about managing your very own amusement park. You get to design rides, create the layout of your park, place scenery, and manage employees. There is a lot of creative freedom in this game, from designing rides to choosing how much to charge to use the bathroom. While I have more nostalgia and spent more time playing the original Roller Coaster Tycoon, I have two reasons for skipping the first one and going straight to 2. The first reason is, except for the expansions to Roller Coaster Tycoon 2, I can't really tell the difference between the two games from the way they play, look, or sound. There are differences in the two games, but they are minor and honestly don't affect how one manages a park much, if at all. The second reason is because of OpenRCT 2, which is an open source re-implementation of Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. OpenRCT 2 adds things like multiplayer support, bug fixes, and if you own them, adds the first Roller Coaster Tycoon's scenarios to the game. This makes Roller Coaster Tycoon and its expansions an expansion pack for Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 now. The options menu has your standard display options. You get the choice of how the game is rendered, which allows for the day and night cycle, and there's also an option for the UI scale. You can also pick what language the game is in, currency, and other localization options. The audio tab allows you to pick which audio device you want for output. It also has the standard audio sliders, and which title screen music you want to be played. Then you have options for controls, with the ability to rebind keyboard shortcuts, what theme you want the windows to be displayed as, and what icons to show on the in-game toolbar. Next, you have what is probably the two best options in the game: the ability to choose how you unlock scenarios and allowing for early scenario completion. Early scenario completion greatly improves the experience of playing because you aren't sitting around waiting for some arbitrary end date once you hit the goal of some of the scenarios, and as a bonus, it allows for speedrunning. The day-night cycle that OpenRCT 2 adds is a neat addition to the game, but sadly it's purely cosmetic. The change in lighting does affect the UI, which isn't good. The option is in the experimental phase, and I hope it improves over time and hopefully adds other weather effects for the scenarios like snow or changing seasons. There's a nice variety of different scenarios in the game to complete. Once you have picked a scenario, you're pretty much free to do whatever you want with the park, with a few exceptions, like not being able to build over a certain height or no advertising. The thing that keeps the scenarios from not feeling too repetitive is that they always take place in different locations. A lot of the challenge in park building is how to use the space you're given effectively. There are parks in forests, mountains, deserts, on lakes, and that's just some of the basic different geography, not to mention the different sizes of the parks. Once a deadline for a scenario passes, you can keep playing the map for as long as you like, regardless of completing the goal. You can also make your own scenarios with the built-in editor, or search for more online if you need more scenarios to play. There are 3 different types of park entrances in the scenarios. They differ in how the visitors pay for things in the park, and this usually plays a big part in how difficult a scenario is. The first type is where visitors pay for an entrance fee. The rides are free, and you make most of your money from getting new people into your park. These parks are usually more difficult because visitors spawn somewhat randomly at the map edge, and you need to be aware of how much you can charge for a ticket to the park and how much money visitors spawn on the map with. The second is pay per ride. There's no entrance fee to the park, but guests need to pay for rides. This type of park is usually the easiest because of the repeated income from rides is more reliable and you can completely empty their wallets. The third type is the infinite money park. You no longer have money problems, but you can't advertise. Most of the infinite money parks revolve around keeping the guests happy, which tests your management skills. Most of the Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 scenarios let the player choose between paying at the entrance and paying for rides. Although there's nothing stopping you from doing both, I found it was easier completing scenarios by going for the pay per ride method when given the choice. Building rides for your park is very simple and is probably one of the reasons why I enjoy coming back to Roller Coaster Tycoon. There are 5 different types of rides: transport, gentle, thrill, water, and roller coaster. You can also build various shops and stalls for the guests to buy drinks, food, or souvenirs. Most of the attractions you can build for your park come with pre-built rides with their own scenery and paths attached to them, which can be turned off if you want. What rides you start off with depend on the scenario. You don't always have access to every single ride, but you can research different rides to add to the park. The rides, scenery, and stalls you research are predetermined, but you can single out which type of ride to prioritize. Each ride has its own stat requirement, none of which is shown anywhere in-game. The requirements for the ride depends on the ride itself, so a wooden roller coaster will have different needs than a looping coaster or a wild mouse coaster. The stats are based on things like the height of the highest drop, the number of drops, how long the ride is, and the g-forces of the ride. Creating custom rides isn't too difficult once you know what problems to look out for. There's an option while building rides to have a ghost train attempt the ride to show where the fatal flaws are in the track's design, and the rides have graphs to show where the ride has high g-forces. You can also save custom rides to use in other parks if you like the ones you have built. Rides have 3 attributes to them: excitement, intensity, and nausea. These scores let you and the visitors know what to expect on rides. Having high scores on nausea or intensity will generally drive visitors away. The nausea rating determines how likely a visitor will turn into a puke machine after getting off the ride. Low intensity scores will make guests pass on the ride to go on something more thrilling, while high intensity ratings will scare off certain guests at the park. The main cause of high intensity in roller coasters is usually unbanked turns, but vertical g-forces can be a problem as well. The guests in your park are somewhat easy to take care of. Keeping guests happy keeps them from vandalizing the park and helps keep the park's rating up. They do need to eat, drink, and use the bathroom, but as long as you build enough shops and restrooms, they should be fine taking care of themselves, as long as the prices aren't unreasonable. You can pick up and place guests around the park, much like the staff. This helps with getting guests unstuck, or just for sacrificing them to Poseidon. You can also see the guests' thoughts and actions. Knowing what your guests are thinking can help with fixing problems with your park, like unclean paths or charging too much for attractions. There are 4 different employees you can hire for your parks: janitors, mechanics, security guards, and entertainers. Mechanics maintain and repair your rides, while janitors keep your paths clean, water flowers, and empty trash cans. Security guards keep visitors from vandalizing benches, trash cans, and lampposts, and entertainers distract visitors in long queue lines. Each of the employees can be assigned a patrol route. The janitors and mechanics are the backbones of your workforce. Keeping the park clean and having functioning rides keep the visitors happy. The problem with the guards and entertainers is that they stop symptoms of poor park management. Vandalism only happens when guests are unhappy, and if you need to keep people in queue lines for long periods of time, then the ride doesn't have a proper throughput or the queue line is too long. The different transparency options that can be toggled on and off help with getting a better view of your park. The option to highlight path issues shows vandalism and messy paths, but for the most part it's just vomit vision. You don't rotate the camera for a better view, you rotate the map. The only reason I notice this is because the compass for the map icon rotates when you push the button to rotate the map. There's not much music playing in the game by default. Most of the music comes from the rides you build in the parks. There is a nice selection for each ride, and outside of the carousel, you get to pick what is played by the ride itself. The genres of music that you can pick from is varied and depends on what scenery you have available. For the most part, the only sounds in the game are the guests in the park making crowd noises or screaming on rides. Besides the problem with the lights and the day-night cycle, I only ran into one other problem that I think is unintended. On the Ayers rock scenario, the water coaster the park starts with has 2 areas that cause the ride to not work. The drops that have water track after them cause the coaster to slow down too much to go over the hill after them, and needs to be fixed. The only reason I think this is a bug is that there's another scenario where the rides need to be fixed at the start, but the game warns you of this before going into the scenario. I recommend getting both Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and 2 if you can. If you have to make a choice between the two games, get Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 because you need that for Open RCT2 to work. For $5, you get Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 and both of its expansions, which is a good amount of content on its own. The biggest problem I could see having with going back to the first Roller Coaster Tycoon is that most of the scenarios are not as difficult as the second. Thanks for watching and see you next time.